I leave you out, our silver fox in the studio, the most dapper gentleman, always.
Yeah, always nice to be with the ladies.
Hey, that's why he now comes in on Thursday. So Ugo Dre, we now know your plan. Well done. You have revealed yourself to us. But Lagos, speaking of revealing ourselves, we've revealed ourselves up on YouTube. Go over to youtube.com/smooth981FM. You'll see our faces up there because we are live streaming. We're also streaming on our website as usual, and the podcast, the app, which you can download, Smooth FM Lagos. And before we jump into the stories, do remember to share your comments with us up on WhatsApp. I see Wale Fatula was in there early this morning preparing, but message us on our WhatsApp number to tweet to you and tweet at us using the hashtag FreshlyPressed981.
We'll start with this story from Guardian. This morning has the headline, How 104 Abducted Dapchi Girls Regain Freedom by Federal Government. So this story in different sections talks about first how 110 Dapchi schoolgirls were abducted last month. And just as everybody was getting really anxious and clocking 1 month, we heard yesterday the breaking news that out of 110 that was abducted, 105 regained freedom, and 5 others were declared dead. And then in other details, some quarters, Ekiti State Governor, the PDP, others calling the federal government to be accountable and tell Nigerians really in detail how this whole thing ensued. Ms. Ireti, Bakare, what's your take on this story?
Okay, so on one hand, we're all elated, right? We're really happy. They're back, and yes, they should never have been taken in the first place, I think. But very early on in this story, you start to get worried. 5 died while 1 is still being held. So now that everybody's rejoicing that all these girls are back, nobody's remembering that there's a girl that they've held back, actually, because she refused to denounce her Christianity.
Exactly.
So that worries me a great deal. Where are her parents, and what are we going to do? Knowing Nigeria, we can't even find the rest of the Chibok girls, let alone bother to look for one. So that sort of saddens me a great deal. Now, let's move on to the embarrassing part. I just have to learn from Obi Ezekwesili what she said. This is a quote, what a testimony. Boko Haram took and Boko Haram returned. For the parents, we thank God. For federal government, this miracle must be deeply analyzed to replicate it for Chibok girls and other issues plaguing our country. And that says it all, because you do have to ask yourself, Funmi and I discussed it downstairs, Ugo and I discussed it downstairs. How is it that the same Boko Haram who took them is the same Boko Haram who drive them back into town, you know, driving along under the wailing and praising of the whole village?
Yeah, without military presence.
It's quite shocking.
Yeah.
Of course, Amnesty International had said, and we also had said on this before, Amnesty said that, look, there were roadblocks before a couple of days, you know, they were removed before the girls were kidnapped. Yeah. You know, Amnesty International repeated it again, and of course the army is denying it. But how can you deny something that is fact? You can't deny it.
Well, precisely, Amnesty International came at them 2 days ago saying that they got reports.
They got warnings. Yes, they got warnings.
Security agencies.
Yes, they got warning that between 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. on February 19th, calls were made to tell the security services that Boko Haram insurgents were in Dapchi area. Nobody did anything about it. Clearly, they all went to sleep or went into a coma or something.
But again, Ms. Ireti, the army did ask Amnesty. They said, let us know which unit was contacted, who was reached out to, and Amnesty refused to say anything about that information because so that they know exactly where the fault was.
They compromise their sources.
No, they didn't ask for a source.
Say who was, you can say where if Folu was called or Ireti was called. Absolutely,
they should know.
Because at the onset of this,
Ugo Dre, because it means that
at the onset of this, they mentioned that the calls were placed to security agencies.
That's right.
They never said it was placed to the army headquarters, the DHQ, or anything like that.
So who, if you're going to accuse the entire army, you must say, okay, this exactly, be specific in the information you're giving. That's all the army is saying. Please carry on, Mr. Ireti.
What's even more incredible is that, so it says here in the story that when Boko Haram were bringing back the girls, all road points, checkpoints, whatever it is you call it, had been taken down. So they cleared the way for them when they came in to kidnap them. They also cleared the way for them when they came to return them.
That was one of the requirements?
No, I'll tell you what's possible. As I said before, and I was scared to say on air, but we did discuss this off air. This was an arranged abduction. I don't care what
in your opinion.
You know what? My own opinion is that
it's become apparent. Actually,
I think that it's just that you can't trust the National Assembly here. But this is the kind of situation or whatever stuff that happens, that you demand a national inquiry.
Thank you. A
We need
national
an
inquiry.
here.
Yes.
What exactly has happened?
Thank you.
And now this now goes back to the Chibok girls as well.
Yes.
Is this a pattern? What exactly is this really a kidnap, or is this a setup?
No,
or is this
it's
so let me read out a couple of comments that came in on this. That's why Wale Fatuna was the first person in there, and is very much in that line with that. He says, when the government said they have not paid ransom, they should be honest enough to tell people what they have done.
Exactly.
It is morally reprehensible, Wale says, to use children as political pawns in a twisted game that they never signed up to play. They kidnapped them, paid themselves ransom, and took them back to where they picked them. Alas, they want to do election campaign with it as part of their success in power. God is watching, Nigeria is waiting. So that's Wale's opinion.
Right, very quickly, Fayose said something which is not too far from that. Fayose said, what is it? Drama scripted by the government and its agents to swindle Nigerians. This appears like an arranged abduction and an arranged release, but we condone with the parents, and all countries do negotiate all countries do negotiate, and they secretly pay to release their people, but unfortunately they don't open the gates for them to bring them back.
All right, so
Again, just very
way.
quickly to comment so that people also consider this, so because there are different angles to it. This could also be considered as a recruitment tactic by Boko Haram. It is a testimony, and look at how people hailed them bringing the girls back.
No, I think that's just giving somebody that's not sophisticated.
These are all suggestions, and it's speculation because we still do not know. It is very possible to say, we took and we give back. Do what we want. It's that straightforward. But please carry on. More stories.
This day is next with the headline: Adeosun, federal government has released 1.248 trillion naira for capital spending for 2017 budgets. In a lot of details, the federal government on Wednesday in Abuja released a statement saying that 1.248 trillion naira was released for the execution of capital projects for the 2017 budget, with the Minister of Power, Works and Housing getting the lion's share of 301.89 billion naira. Is this going to bring the power challenge we've been facing to a rest, Ugo, or this just sound bites and details, flooding papers this morning to let us know the federal government is actually doing so much?
I was just going to ask if you've gotten the COP share, because anyway, my take on this story, Valentine, is that this is the Minister of Finance basically telling Nigerians what they've done with our money. But what I don't really get is why, because what I've noticed, there's a pattern that we've noticed over the last few months, or in fact since last year. Data seems very difficult to get from this particular government. In the past, you go to the CBN website, you can actually mine some of this data yourself and then make an informed judgment or analysis of what they're actually doing with our money. So but you go to the CBN's website, you don't see anything anymore, and then you go to the Ministry of Information's website, there's nothing. Even the budget website, some of these things come too late. So it's actually very difficult to analyze and determine actually what they've done with this money, because quite frankly, apart from some of the things you hear in the news, there's really, I don't think I personally haven't really felt capital expenditure, in at least dividend of capital expenditure in Nigeria. I haven't really seen it that much. Yes, there are roads being built, there are rails being done, but we actually haven't felt it yet. And 1.2 trillion is actually a lot of money not to feel. So yes, the government is releasing money, unlike in previous governments, but I think that for me, my take on this story will be a lot more transparency. Let's get a lot more transparency. And then it's kind of strange that they put 300 something billion in power. She didn't really break down what exactly they're spending that money on. Because as far as I know, the power plants have been privatized, the distribution companies have been privatized, so the government fully only has the transmission.
Or could it be one of the part of the funds that we used to pay off the Gencos?
But the World Bank has put up 700 billion already.
For that already?
Yeah, so I really don't know what that fund is for. Interesting to know.
She also mentioned the section where they said they saved money from personnel costs of the federal government, really, that these monies wouldn't have been accounted for. But she just decided to let us know. Yeah. Anyway, so moving on, we go to the story from the Punch. National Assembly, they passed the 2018 budget April 24th. And this is coming on the heels of the President, Buhari threatening the MDAs to appear or present their summary, report before Friday. So the Senate and the House of Representatives have unanimously taken a decision to pass the 2018 budget on April 24th. Ahead of the date, the Joint Committees on Appropriation will lay the report of the budget in the two chambers on April 19. This timeline, really, how realistic is it for me?
Well, it is realistic if we're going to be closing our eyes and doing what we usually do. Wait till the very last moment so that a lot of things can slip through the cracks. I mean, that's it. But the amazing part about this story is it just stresses one thing that is beginning to replay in this administration, and that is indiscipline at all levels. Now, the budget had been presented since November 2017, and according to the information that was given to the president by the National Assembly, only the heads of 10 out of 60 MDAs have appeared before the committees to defend their budget proposals, and so we have to have a threat of sack from Mr. President for them to act. I mean, what could be more important than going to defend the budget?
Yeah, but could these be signals, indicate that people are not scared of the president, or they don't have reverence for the office of the presidency?
And it's actually not just the president. It's indiscipline that is going through the ranks. So we have court orders nobody is obeying. We have this person making noise and nobody seems to care, and that's sort of what happens when it happens to one person and nothing is done.
The other decides to try.
Dude says, well, I can try it as well, and let me see if nothing is. So it cuts across all. The executive is not obeying orders from the judiciary. The National Assembly is making threats. The
Inspector General of Police is not answering.
Yeah, the Inspector General of Police decides when to appear when summoned by the National Assembly. It's indiscipline on all levels, and now it's beginning to affect our budget. And the annoying thing that will happen is that a lot of things will slip through the cracks. It's after it has been passed, we'll now begin to see the insane amounts for grass cutting
as we gradually approach the 2019 elections.
The same amounts for websites and all of that.
Thank you very much, Funmi. So this next one, we'll quickly run through that. From the Punch, gas shortage, 12 power plants suffer setback, 2,000 megawatts idle. So the challenge of gas supply in the nation's power sector has left nearly 2,000 megawatts capacity idle at 12 plants on Wednesday. Affected areas include Egbin Thermal Power, Geregu 1 and 2, Sugar 1 and 2, Omotosho 1, Odukpani, some others in Trans-Amadi and Rivers IPPs. Ugo, what's your take on this story?
All right, so nothing to be too worried about. This is just, the story is basically out of there's a daily report that I think that power sector report that media houses get every day, and that basically tells you the power being generated in the country and the one that's probably stranded because of gas or one other issue or any other issue. I think we have about 7,000 megawatts or thereabouts installed capacity in Nigeria, and we only probably generate average of 4,500 megawatts, so nothing really new. But what is interesting in this story is if you go further down, they talk about the dispute or the rancor between the federal government and Gencos.
Yes.
Gencos are currently very unhappy with the federal government, and you really can't blame them. So Gencos are having it both ways, are not having it, so they're getting negative impacts from both sides. So the discos are not remitting because they complain customers are not paying them, and then World Bank steps in with 700 billion naira to pay the Gencos. So what is the federal government doing? So the federal government takes the 700 billion naira because they basically guaranteed it, and then they pay directly to the gas suppliers who the Gencos are owing. So and then the Gencos now get a little bit of the money. So the Gencos are saying, hello, hold on. So we don't get the cash flow doesn't really come.
It doesn't come through us.
Yeah. So because they get cash from the Gencos get cash. Pay the distribution company gets cash. That's basically the value chain.
So why call out the Gencos?
Yeah, so they get cash, they pay the embed. Embed now decides how much they're going to pay the Gencos from what they've gotten. Right now, World Bank has brought money again, goes to embed. Embed decide, yeah, so they don't really get the benefit of the cash flow. And what is very instructive is that, and then you look at the Minister of Power, that's Raji Fashola, who I'm obviously not a fan of lately. He's also been in the eye of the storm as well. So he's having issues with the Gencos, he's having issues with the distribution companies. And you're like, how can we get Nigeria's electricity sector moving forward if we continue
and
this
ignore
way?
the side squabbles?
Yeah, it's just squabbles all.
Anyway, thank you very much, Ugo. We'll take some of the messages we're getting on Twitter. so far?
Well, we've got quite a few messages coming in, and we will take a few of them up from WhatsApp. First of all, Gengus still talking about the Dapchi girls' abduction, saying some people kept saying that Dapchi girls' abduction was a scam. Maybe the killings in Benue, Taraba, and Plateau were all scams. Maybe Amnesty International's warning to the military before the abduction was also false, since the abduction was a scam. But the fact is that we have a very serious security challenge in this country, and the security agencies seem overwhelmed by this challenge. We've got more coming in up on Twitter. I think I'll take a couple of those before we move on. Jimo Sharif says the release of the girls is a great feat by the government, but what worries me is the fact that the same insurgents returned the girls to Dapchi and still had conversations with some villagers. Yet Babalai Mohammed said that no ransom was paid. Really? Well, we keep it moving. Up next, let's talk about INEC 2019 elections may gulp 250 billion naira. That's according to ThisDay newspaper headline, but also according to the Independent National Electoral Commission. They've said that the 2019 general election will most likely double the amount voted for during the 2015 exercise. This is because voter population is increased. We will likely hit the 80 mark for political parties registered before the election. All of this meaning that there will be quite a Herculean task, as well, of course, as the fear of the likely threat of violence during the election period. Over to you.
Yes.
For me.
So, before we all get scared, the man explained himself, and he says that about 115 billion and between 115 billion and 120 billion was used to organize the 2015 general elections. And the reason that the amount is likely to double for the 2019 elections is simply because of the exchange rate. At the time, during the 2015 general elections, it was about 150 to $1, and now we have about 360 to $1. So, and most of their cost involves spending money abroad. And when I look at it, I think, okay, so it must mean card readers, and I'm not sure where our ballot papers and boxes are gotten from, but I can almost be certain that it's not from here. So it's a situation where, you know, we're a consuming society, and so where we have to get everything from outside the country, this is what happens. So it's now we've seen it affecting not just us individually, but now the cost of running our elections, where we'll probably have to get, I guess the only local currency we'll be spending is probably personnel cost. Almost everything else we get from outside the country. And when you also think about the fact that I'm sure printing paper is not such a big deal in Nigeria, but I'm not sure I would even trust when our ballot papers are coming from somewhere in Nigeria. So yes, it's something. It's a discussion we eventually have to have. The cost of running elections in Nigeria. It's something that has been spoken about several times over and over.
I mean,
and it ties back to the issue of multi-party system. You know, we have 80 political parties, so that goes to show what will be on our ballot, the amount of parties on our ballot papers. When we probably only have about 3 or 4 serious candidates.
But to be fair, again, the cost of running elections around the world is pretty expensive. Britain's, the UK's election costs are pretty high, and there's mostly digital online, but there's a number of options as well, but it is pricey.
To me, it's good for the economy, provided the money is spent in here. Right? A lot of these things provide food. So, but if all of this money is going to, you know, expatriates, and, you know, then
let's move on. INEC is still in our papers though, and Ms. Ireti, I'm going to get your take on this because they've begun Dino Melaye's recall process. It's supposed to start April 28th. Now, the Independent National Electoral Commission in Kogi State on Wednesday announced the dates for the commencement of the recall process for the senator representing Kogi West in the National Assembly, that is Senator Dino Melaye. This was following a Court of Appeal ruling saying that INEC could commence the recall process. You'll remember that the embattled senator had put forward a suit challenging the move to recall him. The Court of Appeal threw out that suit. They're saying, well, what will happen next is the commission will invite all those who signed the recall register to come forward, identify their signature. When that has happened, there will be a referendum of registered voters as well to see if they want Dino Melaye or not. The senator has vowed to continue fighting.
So, for me, I shouldn't have looked up from her because from the minute she came into the building today, she's like, Miss Ireti, you're doing Dino Melaye.
Did you see the video yesterday?
Yes, I did, and it's insane, and you can't help but, you know, and I was just called by their constituency. I don't believe this
happened.
So, much as we can laugh, and this is about the jester that is Dino Melaye, etc., etc., this is interesting for us to look at because I think we don't know, and sometimes we forget the powers that we have as a people. because now, so once this process is going to go through, they're now going to take a vote. If there's 51% that says yes, they want him to be recalled, then there will be a referendum. It's quite a long process, because I think at the point where I think the people say yes, we want him to be recalled, but what is there to referend? I mean, it is what it is, right? We don't want him anymore. He's causing us major embarrassment. I mean, the guy suggested, so poor, I've got to say this, poor Reuters thought he threatened to cut somebody's head off. For those of you who don't speak Yoruba, what he said in that video is, Enita Berlori, it's metaphorically speaking, not that he's going to have his head cut off, okay? Enita Berlori, Tonshori, okay? It's like cutting the head off a snake. What power do you have? Nothing. So please, let's just put that out there. It wasn't threatening him, but he's still a nuisance nevertheless. Yeah, so anyway, that's what's going on. And like I said, this is interesting. So we need to keep an eye on this and find out what happens. Like, you know, there's a Greek saying, isn't there? Who the gods, how does it go now? He who the gods, something they first make mad. I forget the rest of it. I think it's from Euripides. And that's part of what's going on here. Clearly, he's falling out of favor, and they want this process to take its full, to go to its full course. But he is threatening as usual, and you've got to like the zest of the man.
Well,
he said he's going to take it to the Supreme Court.
So whom the gods would destroy, the first make mad.
They first make mad.
Let's move on from
Hence
that
all the videos.
and see how that goes. From the New Telegraph is our next story. The federal government seeks the forfeiture of Ekweremadu's 22 properties. That is the headline. And we're talking about the Deputy Senate President, Dr. Ekweremadu. They're saying that pending the conclusion of further inquiry investigation by the Special Presidential Investigation Panel for the recovery of public property and or possible arraignment, property or assets, that they're looking to forfeit his property. Let's go over to you, Funmi. What's your take on this?
Okay, so the story is quite very, very detailed. So the federal government has two schedules where they listed two properties.
Yes.
Schedule A, Schedule B. And Schedule A includes properties that he declared in his assets declaration form, while Schedule B lists properties that were not declared, but the federal by him about properties located in Abuja, London, Dubai, Florida, US, and they know his income. They looked at his income, and they state categorically that based on his income, he could not have all of these properties. Senator Ekweremadu is saying that he declared all of his assets, and so he doesn't know anything about the undeclared assets, which will make it easy to get the forfeiture order. So if the property does not belong to anybody, if nobody comes forward to say it is my own, and this man is saying it is his own, then it is easy for us to say it belongs to the federal government of Nigeria.
No, can it not belong to me?
Yeah, you could go forward and present yourself.
Does it come with a jail time?
You never know. You never know these days.
Explain how you got the properties. You could just take it.
We need to move on now. We've got a couple of
gift
messages
from Ugo Dre.
Very quickly, Ugo. This is how they're putting nairametrics in trouble. Up next, Adobe up. You will know that the parastatals are lords unto themselves, and their inefficiency is nurtured by the patronage system that we operate. Moving on quickly now, pension theft. John Yusuf is to 20.
Yes. So first of all, you look at this and you're thinking, of course, finally, if you steal people's pension, I mean, I think that's one of the most heinous crimes, financial crimes you can do, is to steal people's pensions, when we know what happens to pensioners in this country. And worse still, it was the police pensions, which is makes it even more heinous. However, the judge that gave him, for me, these are your people. Look. He wasn't saying he wasn't guilty. He actually said he was guilty. And yet one of your people, one of those judges, we need his name to be out on social media. It's here, Justice Abubakar Tauba of the federal. Yeah, well, he needs to be disrobed if you ask me. Anyway, so he gave him 2 years. Thankfully, EFCC, for a change, finally did their work. They were evidently calm this time. Went back and said, sorry, we need this judgment to be stood down, yada, yada, yada. And subsequently, as a result of that, they've been able to get 6 years and a refund of 22.9 billion.
Well, now, they've ordered him to pay back. Let's see when it will be.
The question is, where's the rest of the money? However, there's a point that I want to read out very quickly. It says here, the judge ruled that the Sentence of the trial court. This is the new judge, by the way.
Which are also my people.
Which is also Funmi's people. Yeah. The judge let me very quickly. The judge ruled that this is important. The judge ruled that the sentence of the trial court does not serve as deterrence to both the convict and the others. Consequently, they ruled that the sentence is hereby quashed and deserves to be reviewed. And that's what's important.
Sierra Leone, Guinea-Bissau, the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria really just saying unless issues of market access and enforcement rules of origin are dealt with, or are not ready to agree to this. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so those are two of Africa's biggest economies out of
number
those
one and two,
agreements.
literally.
So in terms of what this agreement is about, really, it's basically to open borders to for African trade. Currently, African countries actually trade more with European countries or countries in America, or even Chinese companies than they do. Than China than they do within themselves, which is actually not quite good. But Nigeria pulled out, according to the government, because they're afraid that we're going to be a dumping ground. This trade requires that there's going to be a lot of open borders, tariffs will really drop, so there's going to be exports between Nigeria and other countries importing into Nigeria as well. So they back down. We've had rumors that they're setting interest out there who actually don't want this to happen because it might affect them negatively. But to me, I think this is not good. The government should have gone ahead with this. Nigeria exports about 5 times more than we import from within African countries. So I mean, this should have been an opportunity for a lot of our at least for our tech communities to spread their tentacles beyond Nigeria. So by and large, let's hope that the government can do a review later in the year and probably sign up to this agreement.
Thank you very much for that, Ugo Dre. We certainly hope that we can come to some sort of agreement in the near future. And we are done for Freshly Pressed this morning. I know there's a flood of messages. Unfortunately, we cannot take them. But don't worry, we will be having an interesting conversation inside of Lagos Talks 981 just between the 9 and 10 o'clock hours. Coming up next at 8:15, entertainment inside the Grapevine.
The headlines.